there, friends. This is Susie at Gifts from the Heart of Elk Grove, and I'm here with another can-do crafting project for you. Today, I'm going to show you how to make this cute little Christmas tree ornament. And you'll notice that it's using some of the same supplies that I've used on our other recent can-do crafting projects. So it would be a great item to put together with a couple of the other items that I've already shown to give a really cohesive look. Or you could just make these one at a time, and they will look great all by themselves too. Now, for today's project, there are a few simple things that you're going to need, and you can probably find them around your house. If you don't have these exact things, then you can use your creativity and say, what do I have around the house that's similar to what Susie used in the video? And then try using those things to do the same project. You can use the same techniques and yours will turn out great. Plus, it'll be special because you've used the things around your house. So for the project, there are a few things you'll need. One is a stick like this. Now, this is one that I trimmed off a tree in the backyard, but you could use also a piece of wood that you might already have cut from somewhere. You might use a pencil if you don't have pieces of wood just laying around. You might use a dowel. That's a circular or cylindrical piece of wood that you can get at the hardware store, and you might have that laying around your house too. You never know. So some kind of stick-like thing like this, and then you're going to need something to wrap around your stick to make the tree branches. And you can choose if you want to use some scrap fabric. I have some fabric leftovers for some other projects that I've done. They're not really big enough to do a whole nother project, but they're going to be perfect for this. Or if you don't have scrap fabric laying around your house, first of all, that's hard to say. And second of all, not everybody has that. But maybe you have an old t-shirt or an old pair of socks that you have laying around that you don't need anymore. That's something you can use too. I've got this t-shirt sleeve here that I just trimmed it right off at the seam, and I'm going to be able to use that, and I'll show you a little bit more about how to do that next. But say you don't have any kind of fabric around the house that you can use. Some other options might be yarn. If you have yarn laying around, if there's any knitters, crocheters around, you can use yarn. Ribbon is one of my favorites, especially ribbon that has like a little bit of an edging to it. That really ties a nice knot and looks great. You can use a mixture of all of these things. You can use a little ribbon with a little fabric and a little yarn. It's up to you. If you can't find these things, what else do you have around your house? Maybe some curling ribbon or other kinds of ribbon. Anything that's in strips basically will work for this project. On my one that I made here, I used a piece of yarn for the loop at the top, which you could do, but you could also use a different kind of ribbon. You could use a strip of fabric. So that is up to you. Not absolutely necessary to have a different medium for your hanger than your tree, but you could do that if you want. And finally, some scissors will come in very handy for this project. So get those out, have them on hand, be careful, don't run with them, as you know. All right, for making our project, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to need whatever the item is that we're going to be wrapping around our stick to make our Christmas tree. Like I said, here I've used pieces of old fabric ripped up into strips, and I'm going to show you how I did this. And if you watch some of my other videos, you'll already know how I did this. But for those of you that this is your first Crafting with Susie video, let me show you my secrets. So when you're using fabric, there's different kinds of fabric. Some fabrics are woven. For instance, this fabric here is corduroy. It's woven. It has a texture to it. This is a piece of just cotton fabric, also a woven fabric. Usually you can tell if it's a woven fabric because it will have little strings hanging out the edges like this one does, or you can really see it on this one here. And so if it has that, then this technique will probably work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut little notches depending on how wide you want your strips of fabric. I think maybe I'll do mine about like this. So maybe a little less than an inch. You can try different sizes because until you try it, you really don't know how it's going to look. So I would try a few samples, see how you like it. And then once you've got the perfect size, you can use that measurement to cut all the rest of your pieces. So all I had to do was cut this little notch right here. And now to do the rest of it, because cutting in a straight line can be really tricky. But with a woven fabric like this, once I make this little notch, I can just let it rip just like this. And look at this, I get a really nice straight edge on my fabric. And I didn't even have to go through all that cutting. And the ripping's kind of fun too. So that's basically what you do. Here's an example. Here's on my other fabric that I have. I'm gonna go ahead. I've already got the notch cut there. And just let it rip again. And you may see that you have some little strings hanging off here and there. So go ahead and pull those off so that it will look a little more finished. You'll probably have a little bit of a ruffle on the edge here from the woven pieces that are still holding the fabric together, but take off the extra hanging ones. You don't need those. And now that you've got your fabric strip like this, you're going to get your stick, or now it's going to be a tree trunk, so I'll just call it tree trunk, and you're going to wrap your fabric strip around it. So what I would do is I would center my fabric strip so I have about half of it on one side and the other half of it on the other side, like this. Now you can decide how tall you want your tree and how much stem you want there to be. So if I want to have a tree that's pretty close to the ground, a very large tree, I'm not going to leave a lot of stem. So I'm going to tie my first strip very close to the bottom. But if I want a tree with a little bit longer stem, for instance, like this one that I showed you in my sample, that has a pretty tall stem there, trunk, as you would call it on a real tree. So this one, I started tying my pieces a little bit higher up. So that is up to you. You can start anywhere you want. Just don't start too high or you won't have enough room to get on enough pieces to make it actually look like a tree. It'll just look like a stick with some stuff tied on it. But like I said, here we go. I've got this one like this now. And I've got about half of it on one side, now I got to even it out because that is not half on the other side. Okay, like this. And now I'm going to bring the tails in front of my stick and I'm going to cross them over. So you see like this, kind of like it's wearing a winter scarf, right? And then I'm going to take the one that is on the top and I'm going to, as you'll notice, there's kind of a hole right there. I'm going to take the tail that is on the top. I'm going to feed it up through my hole there and pull it. I'm going to keep holding on to this one over here so that one doesn't come apart. Now I'm grabbing onto this one, and depending on which side of the fabric you want, you can see this fabric has different colors on either side. So if I want the plaid side to show, I'm going to fold it over and pull. If I wanted the green side to show, I would just pull it this way. Basically, this is just like tying a knot, like if you were starting to tie your shoes. So I'm going to pull this tight on both sides like that. And you can see it's on there. I might want to fiddle with it a little bit more like this. So I get it just the way I like it. And tighten it up so it won't fall off. And there we go. So that is how you start. And you might say, well, I don't know, Susie, this is looking a little bit like too long on the side. And you're right, it probably is. So I can know when I cut my next strip of fabric that maybe I won't make my strip quite so long, but it's actually better to start with it a little bit long, for one thing, because it's a little bit easier to tie. You have probably tried tying things before where you had too short of tails and you couldn't do it. They kept coming apart. So having longer pieces for tying and then trimming them off later actually is really helpful. Now, say I also wanted to use some ribbon. Maybe I will grab this piece of ribbon right here that I just happen to have sitting here, and I'll do the same thing. But now that I have an idea how long my first tie is, I will now make this one just a tiny bit shorter, because as you'll notice here on the side, when you look at a Christmas tree, usually the bottom is the widest, and then it gets a little bit narrower and a little bit narrower all the way going up to the top. And so I will now take this piece of ribbon that I've got right here. I'm going to wrap it around and do the same thing I did last time, where I make my kind of like a letter X, and then you take the tail of the little scarf here. It's a little hard to remember where to show things so the video can really see it. And pull it tight. And like I said, the good thing about this too is if you mess up, it's really easy to take it apart and start again. If it twists while it's in your hand, like now I've got the knot, but it's on the opposite side of my first knot. No problem, just swing it around like this. And now once I get it just where I want it, I can tighten it up a little bit like this. And you can see I made it it's even, when I pull it out, it might even be a little bit longer than my one before. Who's to say? But I will be trimming this off at the end, so not a big problem. Now, something else you could do, and this might be good for younger children who might want to do this project, but maybe would have a little trouble tying knots. You could also use, you know what this is, pipe cleaner. And this is very easy to just wrap around. And I might have to straighten, this is a coily piece, but straighten it out a little, put it around my stick and just wrap one direction, one the other direction. And because it has that wire in there, it will just fold itself right on. And again, I can just trim it to whatever length I want it to be. And you get the idea. You just keep putting on layer after layer, strips of ribbon or fabric until you get to the top. But before you get to the very top, what I suggest doing is finding something to use as your hanger. For instance, I'm going to take this piece of white yarn right here, and I'm going to use this to make my hanger. So I'm going to take the two tail ends, bring them together like this. And now I'm going to tie a knot. And I like to do a very simple knot where I actually take the whole thing here and I got the tails together in my fingers so they don't come apart. I've got a loop down here. I'm going to actually take my loop and bend it around so it's almost at the same place where my tails are. Gonna cross them over like this. Can you see how I've got one end where there's a little loop and one end where the tails are? And now these tails are gonna go down. They're not gonna go through my loop that I have on the top originally, but now they're gonna go through this loop that I've just formed. Put them down through here like this. Okay, I use my fingers to just push them through that hole there. And once I get them through, just like that, I'm gonna grab onto them on this other side and pull. Pull, pull, pull. And I can even use my fingers here. I'm still holding on to that original loop that I had. I'm going to slide with my fingers, slide that knot that I'm creating down just a little bit, give it a little tug so it's nice and tight. And this creates our hanger. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my stick back up here. And let's pretend that I'm going to actually slide these guys all up a little bit higher on my stick. So we'll pretend that I'm at the top of my stick and I've made all these layers. Of course, you're really going to make all the layers, so it'll look really great. But before I get to the very top, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that one down so it's not driving us crazy. I'm going to take this hanger loop that I created and I'm going to put it on the back like this. And this is one of those things where it's great to have two people working on it. So one person can hold it and the other person can wrap the fabric strips around. Or if you just lay it down on the table, that works pretty well too. But that doesn't work so well for showing it for a video camera. So that's why I'm doing it in this slightly awkward way. So this is the back side of my ornament where the hanger is. And this eventually will become the front side where all my strips, you'll see all my knots on all my strips there. But to include this hanger, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a strip of fabric. I'm going to take my red one that I ripped off earlier. You've got the back here. I'm going to put the strip, center it over the back. Now I'm going to hold that on there with my thumb, turn it around so you can now see the front. Bring my pieces around like this on either side. It's a lot like putting on a scarf. Putting a little scarf on our Christmas tree. I'm going to take this side, put it over the top, create a little loop there again, and bring it up through the bottom. And I'm going to set this down just so I can get a hold of it here. All right, now I've got a hold of it. I'm going to pull it tight like this. I'm going to pull it tight again until I get it really tight like that. And now you can see, if I look at the back, that now my hanger is enclosed in there in my top tie. Now I could even go back and tie another ribbon on top of here if I wanted. Maybe I would pick a finer one. Maybe I'll even just take a piece of yarn. I've got this piece of yarn sitting here. I think I'll wrap this around the very top. And something else kind of cute and fun you can do if you want. For your very top one, if you want to put a bow on the top of your tree, that's what I'm going to do right here, because this piece of yarn is kind of fine. It's pretty easy to tie. I'm going to put it right on top of my red fabric strip that's very wide. I'm going to pull it tight like that, make sure it's really tight. And now I'm going to just make a little bow, just like I'm tying my shoe here. So I'm going to do the 2 bunny ear method. 1 bunny ear, 2 bunny ears, cross the bunny ears like this so they make the letter X. Whoa, I lost my tree. Well, you get the idea. and pull on this tail there. Okay, now that's a nice little bow there on the top of my tree. But this does not really look like a tree yet. It's getting there, but it doesn't look like a tree yet. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out I'm going to pull all of my pieces of ribbon and fabric to the side, one on each side. And I'm going to look and see, okay, is this the shape that I want? Is this the size that I want? And then I can trim it accordingly to make it look more or less like a tree. Now I notice right now that I've got this little piece hanging off here that as cute as it is, it's really going to get in the way. So this is where I can use my scissors to trim that off, just to make it about the same length as the other one. I'm going to save that. I might wrap that around somewhere else later. So we fixed that part there. Now we're looking at our tree and we're saying, which pieces are too long and which ones are too short? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get them all flattened out, nice and even as I possibly can. Then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim at an angle. So I'm just going to take my scissors. I'm going to hold them at an angle. I'm going to start with my bottom part of my tree here, bottom tree branch. And I'm going to cut at an angle. So if this is my largest one, I'm going to just cut a little tiny triangle off of this one, like this. Now I'm going to hold out the next one and I'm going to say, I'm going to keep going at that same angle and cut off this piece here. And now when I get to my gold layer here, actually it's not too far off. And this one, since I just wrapped it around, I might just even adjust the length of it because I can still do that. Oh, but this red one, definitely too long. So if I want it to be just a little shorter than the one below it, I'm just going to take my scissors like this and cut at an angle. There we go, like that. Now, is that starting to look like a tree shape? I think it is. Let's try the other side now here. Got to get each layer one at a time. Now, I think although this side I have a lot of room to work and I have a long piece here, I'm not going to leave it quite that long because it's just going to hang down. It's going to look droopy. So I'm going to start with that very bottom one. I'm going to try to make it about the same length as the one on this side. So I'm going to go like this, cut at an angle, like that. And now I've got my next piece here. A little too long if we're comparing it to the one just below it. So I'm going to trim that one off at an angle. And then we've got this one that's definitely too long, but that's okay. We'll just trim it off. I'm going to look at how long my one before it was and then just trim it a little bit shorter than that one. Since this is the pipe cleaner, it might be a little bit harder to cut. Might need two hands. And finally, I've got this little red one on the top, and I just want to make it a little bit shorter than the one below it. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hold up my red fabric here. Going to hold onto my tree. Going to cut at an angle. Let's see how this goes. And I might need to trim it again. We'll see. Oh yeah, that one still might be a little too long, but we're getting there. So you may have to twist your pieces around one or two times to get it just the way you want it. But with a little bit of work, you can make a very cute little Christmas tree without too much trouble, just using the things around your house. And for an example, I've used a bunch of holiday colors here, but there are a lot of other options of ways that you can do this. And mine might still need a little more work on the trimming. So I'm going to set that down till I can work on it. But here's some ones that are finished. So this one I made using all white, and I used all different textures. I did yarn and I did some ribbon, I did some fabric, but all white. And that kind of gave it a nice wintry effect. I kind of enjoyed that one. Here's one that I did that I just used greens on. And it has some metallics in there. I did the little bow at the top of that one there. So I liked how that turned out. Here's one that's more colorful. It's got little calico fabrics. And I was also thinking something you could do if you happen to have any star-shaped buttons at your house. You could just sew one of those right on the very top of your Christmas tree if you wanted, or a little angel button or anything else you might put on the top of a Christmas tree. Sew it, glue it, however you like, because this is going to be your project. So I hope that you enjoy this project. As you saw, it wasn't too difficult, very easy to do. And I would love to see how you create some Christmas tree decorations and send them to us at giftsfromtheheartofelkgrove@gmail.com. And we will put them on our Crafters Corner part of our webpage right next to our videos where you are watching this right now, hopefully. And we are going to wish you a very happy holidays. Enjoy and have fun doing this can-do craft with things from around your house. Bye.